All right, we're live. Hey, thanks for joining me, folks. I just noticed in the introduction video there, John put that together 4 weeks ago, and I just noticed there's like on one of the scenes, there's a little sort of blurred spot in the middle. One of the scenes where I'm hiking. I remember that day I dropped my camera and then I had like a scratch right in the middle, so it's on that scene. I'll have to get John some new scenes for the video. Hey, thanks for taking time out of your day to join me. When I accepted this offer from Derek to come here and do the show, I really wanted to do this live interaction with you guys and gals, right? I mean, I'm like my biggest platform is I'm on X. And the reason I've always said I like X is because the feedback is instantaneous, right? I can put out a tweet, and if I'm wrong or if I have a bad take on something, I'll get some quick feedback. It's actually a useful platform for me, when you're practicing debating and politics and commenting on stuff. I get to practice stuff on X and then see how it resonates with people. So the reason I'm saying that is this show will be super successful if you guys call in, right? So you can see down on the screen there's the number, 866-479 West. Back in the good old days, that would have cost you probably a long distance call, but we're past that, right? Everybody pays the same rate, regardless of where you're calling in the province. Last week, somebody even, I think it was a lady named Diane who said she had to build up the courage to call, and she was calling down from Florida, which was fantastic. And that's another reminder, right? Don't be shy. Like, I don't know how many times I've said this to people. I am as average Joe Albertan as you can possibly get, right? Sure, I have a bigger following than a few people, but I'm just literally an average guy. Look at me, right? I'm wearing a Columbia sweater. My wife hates this sweater. She says it's all frayed, but it's my favorite sweater. I think I have Costco pants on and a pair of running shoes. Like, if you see me on the street, I'm just a guy. And that happens all the time, by the way. I see people, they're looking at me on the train or someplace like that. Yeah, I even took the train. That's how I get to downtown Calgary. I take the train. So don't be shy. Please call. And before we get too deeply into the show, and I want to take a lot of calls today because I really don't have a lot of topics. I mean, I put up there on the screen, you can see the topic I want to talk about is fiscal responsibility. It's in light of Danielle's budget last week. So let's call in, give me your thoughts on the budget. I'll offer some other suggestions. I'd like to talk a little bit about the referendum that she proposed, because I'm now that I've had time to digest it, I'm not too happy about what she's proposing. The fact that she wants to have sort of her own referendum. I'll talk a bit about that. And I want to talk about some of the things that are going on in Ottawa. But just before I dive deeply into that, speaking of referendum, I've been, some of you guys know this, I've been actually canvassing. So I'm a canvasser. There's about 6,000, 7,000 canvassers in Alberta. I got a nice little pop-up on the corner of Crowchild and Bears Paw Road. I got two crews. I'm usually on the south side, and I got some buddies that are on the north side. We're there almost every day from 11 to 4 collecting signatures. It's going really, really well. And if you happen to be driving by, come by, stop by. If you've already signed, that's fine. Stop anyways, come say hi. But I want to emphasize one thing that I heard about in the last couple of days. Prior to the petition campaign that we're going through right now, the Alberta Prosperity Project was collecting names online in what they were calling pledges. People had the ability in the last year and a half to actually go on the Alberta Prosperity website and pledge that once the petition signing period would be on, that they would sign, right? Well, we're calling around and we're talking to people, and we're realizing that some people think that pledge was actually signing the petition. It's not, folks. Like, the laws, the independence petition that was launched by Mitch Sylvester on behalf of the Alberta Prosperity Project. It requires hand signatures. People have to show up, show a quick piece of ID, confirm you're an Albertan, you live here, and then physically sign. So just a reminder, if you pledged on the website and you thought that was good enough, it's not. Unfortunately, you have to come out and sign. All right, so no question. So let's talk about a couple of things. So actually, let's stay sort of on the referendum topic. Last week, Danielle had a press conference, Danielle Smith, and in there she announced that she was going to do a referendum or actually it was 2 weeks ago now, not last week. she announced that coming up in October of this year, October 19th, she was going to have a referendum. And then she proposed a whole bunch of questions. And I got a big problem with that. First of all, I got a problem with the fact that we're going to show up in the booth there and we're going to have like 9 or 10 referendum questions. I think that's too many. I think that's an abuse of a process. To me, seriously, referendums should be very rare. And when they happen, they should be on some very specific topics. Among the things that Danielle Smith wants on her referendum, I think, are things that fall in her purview as premier. I mean, she wants to put things on there. I got a list on there here, but I'll go by memory real quick. I mean, she wants to have several questions around immigration, right? She's going to ask the people of Alberta, should we, quote unquote, deny benefits to people that are still just seeking, residency and things like that. I don't think she needs to hold a referendum for that. I think that's in her mandate. But I'll come back to the word mandate, right? Because Danielle seems to take that to heart, that she feels that if she's elected to do something, she's elected on a platform and then she does it. And if something new comes along that she needs to go get a mandate, I don't think so, right? I mean, politicians are elected for 4-year terms. If they only campaigned on things that were current in the year that they get elected and something new came up, I think they're allowed to deal with new issues throughout their terms. I don't think they need to go necessarily get a new mandate. But so she wants to talk about things that I think are clearly within, her jurisdiction. She can change the laws around immigration and benefits and things like that. But then the other thing worrisome in her speech 2 weeks ago is she talked about wanting to put up some questions that are really constitutional in nature, right? Like, should Alberta force Ottawa's hand and to discussions around, I don't know, the courts and other things that are really constitutional. And I don't think that is a mandate. So that's something that up until recently, the people of Alberta weren't talking about, weren't asking. So I don't know why she's putting that on there. We're not interested in that kind of stuff. So what I'm saying to Danielle, if I had the opportunity to talk to her right now, is I would say this: drop all your silly referendum questions that you have. You have 5 of them that to me are related to things that are already in your control. And if you don't feel like they're in your control right now and they're not in your mandate, then either call a snap election or wait another 1.5 years because your term is up, and then make immigration an issue on your next platform. So you don't need a referendum for now. Either act now on a referendum act now on immigration or make it an issue in the next election. And as far as the constitutional things, again, that's not in your purview. That's not your jurisdiction. That's not your responsibility. No one wants to even talk about that. So don't even force the issue on that. Let the people of Alberta who are currently collecting signatures. Yeah, we had Thomas Lukasik had his petition, and he collected 400,000 signatures on something like an independence question. And now you have Mitch Sylvester collecting his signatures on an independence question. So let's just have a very simple referendum in October with an independence question, and let's not muddy the waters with a whole bunch of other things. All right, so that's my thoughts on that. Folks, I'm serious. Don't be shy. Give us a buzz. You see the number there on the bottom, 866-479-WEST. I'm not sure what WEST translates to in the number. I have to figure it out on my keyboard. All right, let's talk then a bit about fiscal responsibility, which is it's one of the things that I'm most known for online, is the fact that I like to go through numbers. I had a career in the oil patch, and as I moved into upper management and in the office in my career, managing budgets, managing my finances, knowing on a day-to-day basis how much oil I was producing, how much gas, what it was costing me, all of that was something that I had to do, but it was something that I actually enjoyed doing. I enjoy diving through numbers and using data and numbers to manage my assets. And when I retired, that translated nicely. It's something I love doing. I love going through the budgets of, Ottawa and in particular, Alberta. And I'm going to be honest, 2 years ago or last year when 2 years ago, Smith's budget disappointed me. I mean, the first one after Kenny, the first one after COVID, I understood what happened during COVID. I mean, everybody went crazy during COVID and we started spending, not we, government started spending a little too much, I think, during COVID. And I was hoping that in the first few budgets after COVID, that things would start coming down again. Because often when I talk about life in general, I'm at the point now where I talk about pre-COVID and post-COVID. For me in my life, COVID was a big demarcation. A lot of things changed before and after. So when Smith published her first budget when she first got elected, and it was a post-COVID one, I was disappointed. It was a big number, right? It was like in the $70 billion range. I expected it to be back into the $60 billion range, but I forgave that one. Then last year she published another budget, and same thing. She started getting on track. She's, as far as I'm concerned, the province is on a bad track. The province is, the amount of money that the province is spending is outpacing population growth and inflation. And the problem with inflation is that the government spending causes inflation, right? So you can see how that's like a spiraling problem. Government creates inflation and then budgets to match inflation. Well, that makes no sense. So I was disappointed with last year's budget because it's outpacing inflation and population growth. Well, this year's budget, the one that just came out, as far as I'm concerned, this is a catastrophe. I haven't even dove into it. I will dive into it, but on the surface, when I see a province like Alberta publish a budget with a $9.4 billion deficit, I don't even need to go into it. I mean, immediately it's a non-starter for me because governments, to me, as far as I'm concerned, government should be we should be living within our own means. We do it as citizens, and I think governments should be doing the same thing. If the money's not coming in, then you have to cut somewhere. This constant idea of going into deficit after deficit after deficit, to me, that doesn't resonate. And I do think there are lots of places where government can cut their spending. I'd love personally to have something like Donald Trump had for a while, the Department of Government Efficiency, the DOGE. I guarantee you, if I was allowed full access to the government's books, I could find 10-15% savings across the board. I mean, I know for a fact that we've been hiring, our civil service has been growing again disproportionately in recent years. Like for every 10 jobs that are created in Alberta, 3 of them are in the public sector, like government jobs, and then the other 7 are in the private. That's an unsustainable level. So back to the budget, the 9.4 billion, to me, that's a non-starter, and it's also against Smith's own rules. I mean, she passed these accountability rules that said we cannot have deficit after deficit. We can't have 3 in a row, and she has 3 in a row now. So there's a big problem there. And I come back to this all the time. To me, Alberta has a spending problem, not a revenue problem. Everybody keeps blaming oil and other prices and other commodities that affect the budget, but that's a non-starter. The other thing that's really, really discouraging when I see Danielle's budget, and then this is a bigger picture thing, the $9.4 billion deficit almost matches dollar for dollar Alberta taxpayers' share of the equalization payments that are going to the east. So how am I supposed to feel as an Albertan knowing that, I'm going in debt, my future generations, my kids, my grandkids are going into debt, so that we can have money that we then leaves our province, goes to Ottawa, and Ottawa redistributes to provinces out east. And again, I've always said I'm in favor of helping in times of need, but we're not in times of need in recent history. I don't understand why Quebec would require year after year after year after year a $9 billion bailout. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm going into debt right now so that the equalization payment can go to Quebec and Quebec can give themselves free tuition. I mean, am I the only one who sees it that way? Anyways, that's my thoughts on Danielle's budget at the highest of levels. I don't like what's going on. I will dive deep into it, But you know, while I wait for calls, one of the other things I really don't like in her recent budget is she basically admitted that some of the costs have to go up to deal with the influx of immigrants. And again, that's something that I have a problem with, right? Well, I'll give you an example regional to where I live. I belong in a little water co-op, right? So I live out in the country, and there's an acre, and we're all on acreages, and we stopped drilling wells. We formed a cooperative together, and we have a little water plant, and then we have 2,500 members that belong to this co-op. Well, if a new member, if a developer comes in our neck of the woods and wants to build a development with 15 new houses, and I don't have enough capacity in our co-op to provide him water, I'm not the one who pays the extra money to provide, right? So the developer who comes in at the last minute, the last people who come in our development, they pay for their upgrade to the water system because they've came on board. Well, I feel the same way about the recent tax increases. And one of the tax increases that's really hard to swallow is education. Danielle says that we have so many new immigrants here, like 600,000, which brought in 80,000 new kids. We need to catch up on building schools. And our taxes are going up disproportionately, especially on the education side, to pay for new people that are coming in the province. Well, that makes no sense, because I mean, I've always been sold on the idea that we're supposed to have, you know, immigrants, and growth is supposed to be good for us, and is supposed to make all our costs go down, economies of scale. But in this instance, growth means that we're having to pay extra costs, and I got a big problem with that. All right, we got a call on the line. Before I take it, I'll take the call. Like I said, give me your name, where you're calling from. And if you just want to drop a question and let me answer, that's great, because if you hang up, that allows somebody else to call in. If you stay on the line too long, the line sounds busy and nobody else can call in. You know what I mean? So so if I ask you to drop off, that's because we're just trying to open the line for other people. So go ahead, name and where you're calling from, please.
Helen from Foothills.
Hi, Helen. How are you today?
I'm good, Marty. And you?
Excellent.
Well, I think you and I probably are on the same wavelength in that we should scrutinize what is being spent and have something like the United States Dodge or whatever to go through the books, because it's ridiculous. My focus, and that's all because I know about it, is about the waste of money, spending good after bad money on nothing. That is what we call the education system. And first of all, we don't teach English properly. Second of all, we don't teach cursive writing anymore. We don't teach the basics or do it properly. Even academia professors are shaking their heads in regard to the skills that grade 12 students come out with now. And this has been, for a long time. We have gatekeepers there and secret, what is it called? Sealed servicing managers that seem to want to keep the status quo rather than developing our true potential. I have two nieces that are both teachers in Ottawa, and they started teaching learning French in very primary schools. I don't know what grade, but the first couple of grades. And neither of them know how to speak French or English well, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Math. I didn't know math. I'm sorry. I wasn't good with math at all. And when I went back to university and had to take some statistics courses, I learned that the best students there as being a mentor for me were the Russian students, because they knew how to, and they were very helpful, and they knew how to show you how to learn the math.
Yeah. Okay. Helen, that's awesome. Let me unpack a little bit of what you've said. You gave me some food for thought, but if you don't mind, hang up and then we can let somebody else. But thanks for calling, Helen. So let me unpack a couple of things she brought up, which are fantastic, right? She did bring up the fact that we spend a lot of money without accountability, and I'll talk a lot. I got more to say about that, but that's one of I understand that industry and government are not the same, but they have some similarities, right? In industry, if my boss gave me money year after year and I didn't show results, I wouldn't get more money at some point. Whereas, so in government, there's two problems. The first problem is there's no measurement to see if there has been improvement. She brings up good point. I think in some things like education, I guess we can measure and see if it's getting better or not. But there's other areas where we barely measure. We don't know how the government's doing, how the money's being spent, what value we're getting for that money, and they keep asking for more money. So I think that brings up that's a very important point. Ultimately, that's why I always believe in smaller governments. I mean, smaller governments that spend less, it's easier to manage. But governments in and of themselves are beasts. Now, as far as the language and the skills that the kids are getting when they graduate, one thing I'm still hearing is that Alberta is still producing some pretty good kids, right? Like our system is not completely broken, so that's one good thing. But I just lost my thought. She had something else she said that was interesting. But anyways, thanks for calling, Helen. I hate it when that happens, when I lose my thought. She brought up something that made me think of something good, but now I completely lost it. Well, actually, what I was going to bring it down to is charter schools and other schools, right? Boy, there's so much to unpack today. That is another issue that we have in this province right now, is that when I just remembered my thought. The problem is with the bigger government and the bigger system. She was talking about gatekeepers. That's what she was talking about, gatekeepers, right? A lot of people know the problems, right? So let's say, loosely speaking, if some of the kids have issues and we know how to address the issues with either technology or changes to the classroom or things like that, it can be in a classroom. We even know in other areas where government spends, right? We know problem in healthcare. We know some of the problems. We know some of the wait lists, the waiting times. We know some of the inefficiencies. People who work as ambulance drivers can tell you stories. People who are cops can tell you efficiencies and inefficiencies. Like a lot, it goes back to what I said earlier. You give me access to the data, I'll find those efficiencies. They're everywhere. They're inefficiencies everywhere. The problem is, as our governments get bigger, the bureaucracy becomes a problem in and of itself, and you can't address the efficiencies. You can't bring in solutions to the problem because you get blocked by people who, quote unquote, benefit from the problem, right? Teachers are a perfect example. I pick on teachers a lot, but there are way better ways of teaching kids. We could bring in tools. We could bring in methods and technologies that would improve, but it might mean that you could get by with a few less teachers, and the unions will fight those initiatives. The healthcare system does that all the time too. You walk into a modern Alberta hospital, if there is such a thing, and you see, and then you go to Europe. Like you go to Europe, go visit Germany, go visit France, and go see what super efficient modern healthcare looks like, and ask yourself why we don't have that. Which, by the way, brings up a whole other point, which is interesting. Yesterday I saw Naheed Nenshi is piling up on the NDP are piling on to the Conservatives, saying, the Conservatives are mismanaging the province, which is ironic because some of the biggest deficits we ran, under Notley, I think we ran about a $90 billion deficit. So I don't think the NDP are in a position to lecture Conservatives on fiscal responsibility. But then she's piling up on, and he uses a term that I really can't stand, which is, he'll use language along the lines of Albertans deserve better, or not just deserve better. Albertans deserve the best healthcare. Albertans deserve the best schools. Albertans deserve the best roads. Albertans, and then she's not the only one who does that. Pay attention. You'll hear a lot of politicians say that we deserve the best. Again, there's no such thing. We'd all like the best, but do we deserve the best? Can we afford the best? I just don't like that language. I don't like, and I'm critical of Nenshi using it. But if Danielle Smith used the same language, if Danielle Smith says we deserve the best schools, I'd be like, no. Put that to a vote and specifically ask the people who are paying for the schools if they think we deserve the best schools, right? I mean, I'm by her language, by using that language, I should be driving a Mercedes-Benz car and I should have $1 million house because I deserve the best. But what I deserve versus what I can work for and afford is a big difference, which is why I drive a Ford F-350 instead of something nicer. You know what I mean? Okay, well, you guys are testing me today here. You're going to make me keep talking. And weirdly, sometimes it just doesn't go that way, right? So I showed up in studio and I kind of told John, like, hope I didn't have a lot of topics to talk about. So I told John, I hope let's make it all about call-ins. And now you guys are testing me. I'm going to go start going down through my list of topics. Let's stay on schools for a second. Here in Calgary, the new mayor, Jeremy Farkas, has been making a big stink about something else that came out of the budget, right? So I said earlier that Smith has admitted that we need to increase the funding to schools to catch up with all this influx of new immigrants and 80,000 new kids. So we have to catch up. And that catch up means like a son that everybody who's here, who's been here for the last 20 years, now has to pony up to build quickly some new schools for the people who are arriving. I think that's wrong in and of itself, but I also think the way they're going about it is wrong, right? So Danielle Smith increased the amount of money she wants to spend on education, but the education taxes are collected by the municipalities. And so Calgary noticed it. I noticed it last year in our municipal taxes. There was a sudden jump. And, you know, go look at your tax bill, right? When you get your tax bill, you'll see on there that most tax bills, municipal tax bills, have about 4 things, right? You'll have, let's say you have a $3,000 tax bill. You'll have $1,500 of that that's probably going through to this municipality directly. And that's for your road repairs and your snow removal and your garbage disposal and stuff like that. Then you'll have a chunk in there that's like $1,000, and that's your education levy. So the government decides how much money it needs to spend on schools, but then it makes the municipality collect that chunk. I think that's wrong. I think municipalities should only be collecting stuff that they are responsible for. And then the other 2-3 things you'll usually find on your tax bill might be something like a little bit of money for libraries, some money for some foundation, old age homes, things like that. So if you look at this year's tax bill, you probably haven't received your tax bill yet. You've only received your tax assessment, your property assessment at this point, but take a look at your tax bill for this year. Hopefully you got last year's and the years before, and go look at it. And I guarantee you're going to see the education portion of them going up disproportionately. Last year, me personally, when I got my tax bill for the municipality, I got mad. And I called my county. I'm like, what's going on, right? Why this, 9% jump? Because it didn't match what the county told us. The county told us that they were, increasing taxes by about 3.5%, but I got a 9% jump. And when I looked at it, the big bulk of that jump was the education component. So Farkas is onto something there, and we'll see what happens. I don't think anything will happen of it. I mean, the budget is the budget, and the municipalities will be stuck. They're the ones stuck being the bad guys and collecting the money. Any calls, John? Come on, folks, give me a buzz. I know it's lunchtime. Everybody's welcome to Alberta, right? Where everybody takes their lunch break and then immediately goes back to work. I know how it works, folks. I know you guys are sitting at your desk and you can take a few minutes to make a phone call, or some of you guys are probably driving. Well, I guess we're gonna stay on the topic of fiscal responsibility. Helen brought up something that there was an oversight. I want to talk about something that something that's bugging me. In Ottawa, well, a lot of things. This is going to turn out to be the Marty monologue today. In Ottawa, actually, Danielle just did her budget, and Ottawa is about to do their budget. Weirdly, right? People keep saying, well, how could Ottawa be just getting ready to do their budget when we just had the budget? The budget cycle in Ottawa runs from April 1st to March 31st. Okay, so it's not the same fiscal year as you and I. Most of us have a January 1st to December 31st fiscal year. Ottawa and most governments, because of their recesses and summers and when they sit, whatever, have basically an April 1st to April 1st budget. So when Ottawa passed the budget recently in November, it was actually 7 months late. Okay, so it should have passed way back in March, April, May, but they waited until November. In fact, remember, Ottawa said they weren't even going to do a budget, and we forced Carney to do a budget. But so Ottawa used the excuse that they weren't going to do a budget because they had just had the election and Carney just came into power and he didn't know what was going on. Again, I call bull because they'd been in, it's not like if we'd had a change of government, if the Liberals had been in power and suddenly the Conservatives came into power, okay, maybe they need a little more time to see what's going on and do a budget. But we basically had no change in power. It was the same guys. So Carney tried to pull a fast one by not doing a budget. He was forced into it. He finally submitted a budget in September that was voted on in November. And now, and by the way, it was approved by the narrowest of margin. But there's actually, after it's done, the budget is not authority to spend. The budget is simply a budget. The authority to spend comes from bills. There has been absolutely no appropriation bill since the budget was approved. I'll come back to the budget. I got a call on the line. All right, who's on the line? Name and where are you calling from, please?
Hi, Marty. This is Ed from Spruce Grove.
How's it going, Ed?
Met you a couple of times. Good. A question for you. When Alberta becomes independent, do we basically go from 3 levels of government to 2? And I'll hold there for a second.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what happens. We go from 3 to 2, but the one, we go in. We have municipal, provincial, and federal. So now we'll have municipal, provincial, but our provincial government will have to do a little bit more. Our provincial government will have to do things that used to be done by Ottawa, like border security and the military.
Okay, I'll just make a comment and then get your thoughts on it. So we now have 120 elected officials. We've got 37 MPs, 87 MLAs, and 6 senators. So that's 120. Could we operate with 10 senators, 2 from the north, 2 from Edmonton, 2 from Central, 2 from Calgary,
Oh, yeah.
2 from Southern Alberta, and then 25 elected officials, 1 for every 200,000. Look at the savings we get off of that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, we will. Well, a couple of things. If Alberta stayed as a constitutional type monarchy with a Westminster system, then
I'll hang up here, Marty.
Okay, all right, thanks, Ed. So all right, so Ed's, let's stick to the sort of the easy model. If we get rid of Ottawa, then in the coming days after the separation, Alberta would no longer need a Senate because we'd have our own little Senate, right? So instead of the 10 senators, he's right, we might need a handful here. We'll have to have something to replace the Senate. The MPs, the 34, the 37 Albertans that are federal MPs right now, they all lose their job because we don't need that anymore. We don't need any representation in Ottawa. Anybody who's in the Canadian military that wants to stay in Alberta, welcome aboard. And then we'd have to build a Canadian, an Alberta military, an Alberta police force, a few things like that. But so we lose a few jobs. We definitely save money because right now we're sending, $70 billion of Alberta taxpayer money goes to Ottawa. And in return, we get like $40 billion in services. 30 billion just disappears through equalization payments and money misallocated and spent elsewhere and given and wasted. So we would net out in principle, we net out $30 billion. We come out at top $30 billion richer, but then we have to use some of that for the military and things like that. I mean, a military, 2% spending on GDP annually. Alberta's GDP is like, $300 billion. So what's 2% spending on GDP on that? Like it's, $6 billion a year. I mean, it's not a huge amount of money. That's kind of the status quo. But I think the bigger question is, what does Alberta look like down the road? I don't think we want, and this is where Corey Morgan and some of the others are like the real experts, the Jeff Raths and others. I think in Alberta has to transform itself and not simply be a mini version of Canada with a Westminster system. I personally hope that we will end up being a republic with a we the people type constitution, maybe smaller representation. I hope we have a big overhaul and change some things very drastically and shrink the size of our government. So that's that's I'm all in that way. I don't want to just separate and be a mini Canada. Yeah, I feel bad if you're an MP, if you're whatever, some of the MPs that are sitting in Ottawa right now, the day after the election, you're out of a job. So are some of the 2 senators that we have out there and some of the judges and things like that. But it is what it is. So back to where was I? I was talking about Ottawa. All right. So I was talking about Ottawa's budget. So the budget was passed by the narrowest of margins, and then Ottawa's been spending on it incorrectly because they should have passed some appropriation bills, and there hasn't been any appropriation bills. Parliament's not even sitting right now. And by the time Parliament resumes in a couple of weeks, one of their number one priorities will be to start preparing to table the budget for 2026, 2027. So, crazy time we live in. But the craziest thing that's going on right now, and people aren't aware of this, is there are these important nonpartisan positions in Ottawa, and one of them is a position called the Parliamentary Budget Officer. And so the Parliamentary Budget Officer helps put together the budget, helps analyze the budget, along with, the Auditor General has an important role, but the Parliamentary Budget Officer has an important role in preparing the budget, analyzing the budget, and analyzing proposals that come from MPs. So let's say an MP wants to study, wants to table wants a budget, wants a universal basic income. Some MP thinks that we should, the government should go down that path. Well, the cost of that they can ask the Parliamentary Budget Officer to investigate what that would cost. If somebody says we should cancel diesel cars and force everybody to go to electric vehicles, that has an impact. So then the Parliamentary Budget Officer could study that. Well, right now we don't have a Parliamentary Budget Officer. I mean, we had one. A really good one named Yves Giroux. He had been appointed. So Yves Giroux was appointed for a 5-year term as a Parliamentary Budget Officer. His term came to an end last year, and they knew when his term was going to end. It's a fixed date, and the Liberals dragged their feet. They had nobody to replace Giroux when his term ended, and they appointed instead an interim person while they continued their search to find a suitable replacement. And that interim Parliamentary Budget Officer, a guy named Jason Jacques, his term ended on March 2nd, a couple of days ago. So for the first time in forever, in as long as I can remember, we don't even have a Parliamentary Budget Officer. So we have a government that wasted half a year before they finally gave us a budget. The budget is approved. No appropriation bills have been passed to allow spending of budget money. We don't know how much they're spending. We don't know what the deficits are like. We don't know anything. And now we don't have a Parliamentary Budget Officer, and we're entering the budgetary period in Ottawa. Like, am I the only one who thinks that's crazy? Go ahead. Who's on the line? Where are you calling from? What's your name, please?
Hey, Marty. I just pick up on what you're saying.
Sorry, you are totally rubber banding. You hang up and call again. I really can't hear a word you're saying. Okay, we'll let that caller try and get back to us there. But yeah, no Parliamentary Budget Officer. Like, this is egregious, and Canadians should be upset about this. Now, I understand that Canadians aren't upset about it because most Canadians don't even know what's going on. So on our behalf, the Conservative Party or the opposition should be upset about this. And I'm not hearing any noise from them. So, we don't have our systems are falling apart. Like I keep saying, we're not a serious country when these basic structural elements of our democracy are not functioning. Is that the same caller, John? We'll try again. Go ahead, please.
Hey, Marty, it's Mac again.
There you go. Perfect.
Marty, I think that what you were just talking about in regards to Jason Jocks, I think he's a fantastic parliamentary budget officer, and the new Republic of Alberta should hire that guy. But that's my opinion, because I thought he did his job well. He pulled the fire alarm on the federal government, saying, this is crazy. This is a danger. And I think it makes a great argument for Alberta independence when you have a federal government that is so irresponsible with everybody's money. I mean, I'm a couple of years away from retirement, but I don't expect CPP to be there. I mean, just crazy how they're leveraging the future of all Canadians, but never mind Albertans who have put in the most, and have zero accountability. And that's what I think what brought me to the Alberta independence movement was the fact that we're going to be looking at having complete accountability over every dollar that's collected, instead of these runaway budgets and reckless spending that puts everybody's future at risk.
Yeah, no, stay on the line. Let me let's talk about this a bit further. You're right, and actually, Jason Jacques is good, but Yves Giroux was even better. Yves Giroux as a parliamentary budget officer, do you remember, like, he was the guy, he would be brought to committee, and like you said, he was doing his job almost and pushing back and identifying issues. One of the issues that Jacques, maybe it was Jacques or maybe it was Giroux, but either or, they were both very good. Remember, one of them identified the fact that, and you brought up pension, right? One of them identified the fact that Carney included the Canada Pension Fund in the balance sheet of Canada. And I think it was Giroux. Giroux said, you cannot do that because the excess money that Canadians have contributed to their pension plans has been invested in something called the Canada Pension Fund. And it's there for future generations when the pyramid scheme starts to fall apart, because by the way, the Canada Pension is a pyramid scheme, right? 7 workers today pay for the 1 retiree. And then in the future, it'll be 5 workers for every 1 retiree, and then 3 to 1. And eventually we'll run out of workers. And that's why that fund's important. But yeah, they got in trouble for pointing out things like that.
Yeah. And that's, for me, to have any spending without a parliamentary budget officer is completely irresponsible and a great advertisement for why Alberta needs its independence. I mean, when we're going down the road where the Prime Minister invests in his own former company with Canadian pension money, which is illegal under the law,
yep.
But, they've done it in such a way where it kind of fuzzes the numbers, but he's enriching himself in front of everybody. That's why I agree with Jeff Rath that he's like one of the best proponents for Alberta independence, without a doubt.
Totally agree. Yeah. No, thanks for that. Appreciate the call. That was.
I'll hang up now, Marty.
Yeah, excellent. Haven't had a chance to look into that, but I think he was referring to, on his trip to India and currently in Australia, Carney apparently looks like he's making some pretty shady deals, and he's throwing around the Canada Pension Fund as an investment tool or something like that. So we'll have to come back on that one maybe next week when I've had a chance to digest that one. By the way, that's another report I love to. I mean, this is Marty's routine, right? So I have a little list of reports that I go look at. So I used to go look at the Parliamentary Budget Officer's website about every couple of weeks. I got a checklist, wake up in the morning, read a couple of news stories, surf X, but then I go dive into Parliamentary Budget Officer, always excellent, because I could go see what they were thinking of, right? So if the parliamentary budget, like I'll tell you right now, one of the latest reports that the Parliamentary Budget Officer did was he was sounding the alarm on the cost of salaries in the government sector. Like he has a whole report, not only a report, he built a tool. There's a tool on the PBO website that shows the fully burdened cost of federal employees and by department. So you like the best paid federal employees were the ones who work for the Department of Justice. Of course, that's mostly lawyers and judges. So they're paid like $260,000 a year kind of thing on average. But then you go down there and you start seeing like departments like the Canada Revenue Agency with like 70,000 employees, and the average salary of a CRA agent is like $137,000 a year plus benefits. So that was an example of a report. But the other report on there, you could see they're toying with universal basic income. They're toying with the idea of taxing capital gains on primary residences. How do I know that? And they can't hide it, because the parliamentary budget officer says, I ran a report on this proposal from MP so-and-so. So you go to the website and you see what silly ideas are coming up. So I was just giving an example. I go there every day, but then other reports I love looking at. I'm anxiously waiting right now because it's the end of the year. And so, the private sector is doing its annual reports. They all come out in March, April, right, at this time of year, but so do public corporations. So I'm looking forward to seeing the annual report for the Canada Pension Fund. I'm looking forward to the annual report for Canada Post and, organizations like that. Canada Post is going to be a disaster, by the way. I mean, I'm forecasting the Canada Post will have lost $2 billion last year as a Crown corporation. And don't get me started on the CPP. The CPP has extra funds that get invested into the CPP Investment Inc., which is a Crown corporation. And last quarter, CPP Investment Inc. Had a 0.9% return on investment. 0.9% return on investment. If you factor in that inflation's sitting at 2.3%, they're losing money. And they keep showcasing that, the fund is growing. The fund's not growing organically. The fund's growing by the fact that Albertans over-contribute to CPP. For working Albertans paid $9 billion in CPP deductions from their payroll, and retired Albertans get $6 billion in CPP benefits from Ottawa. So what's happening with the other $3 billion? Go look at the CPP Investment Inc. and they'll boldly say, hey, our investments grew by $3 billion. Yeah, because you had an infusion of cash from Alberta. But that's a topic I wish. Now that's a topic I wish Danielle would bring back. I think she messed up on the Alberta pension plan. They scared everyone, right? Remember when we started talking about having our own Alberta pension plan and how we were entitled to money from the CPP, and then they were throwing around a big number like we're entitled to $300 billion, and everybody said, well, that makes no sense, right? They were looking at the fact that the CPP had $700 billion in there, and then they're divided by 10. You don't divide by 10, you divide by 9, because Quebec doesn't even contribute there. They have their own pension plan. So you got $700 billion, you divide by 9, but then you realize Ontario and Alberta are putting most of the money in there. The other little provinces aren't doing it. So is it reasonable that Alberta's share of the CPP, if we withdrew today, would be in the $300 billion range? 100%. It absolutely is reasonable. But I'll say this, having looked at the numbers myself, we should just start our own Alberta pension plan today, regardless, because we got more workers per retiree than any other province. So the quote unquote pyramid scheme of a pension plan works in Alberta despite not having a fund. It will work that way for at least 20 or 30 years because of our population demographic, and we have time to build up our fund. Now, if we got money back from CPP, that's even better. But that's just gravy. You know what I'm saying? So we don't need to drag our feet on starting our own pension plan in this province. We don't need to wait to see what Ottawa sends us. We could start one tomorrow morning and we'd start benefiting. I mean, just think of I don't want to talk about independence. That wasn't the purpose of my show today. It wasn't independence. All right, no calls. Well, let's all right, okay. Well, luckily I put down a couple of things. So let's go back. This is in line with the parliamentary budget officer. John, if you don't mind, do it in a second here, but I told you I belong to different, I go look at data at different places, and I belong to different newsletters, right? lot of federal newsletters. So I registered with the with the Prime Minister's office, so I get their daily newsletters. I also get daily newsletters from the NDP, daily newsletters from the Liberals. Like trust me, folks, sometimes I take one for the team, right? Being a member of the NDP party, just so I can get their newsletter, that truly is taking one for the team, because that newsletter reads like a communist manifesto every week. But I get I get the briefings and the press releases from the Prime Minister's office. So yesterday out comes this press release on senior appointments. So just flash it up real quick there, John. It's probably too small for you folks to see, but I'll just read the headline. Today, the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, announced the following changes in the senior ranks of the public service to take effect in the coming weeks. That's where I was looking to see if the new parliamentary budget officer was being announced in there. So I'm just glancing through there. You can take it down, John, but there was like 50 names on there, and not one of them is a new parliamentary budget officer. But maybe John will be able to put the link and you guys can go see it just for your own fun. Just for your own fun, go look at that announcement, right? Go look at these titles and look at, let me read you one of them, right? So, well, actually, there was a couple of interesting ones. Let me bring up this first one, right? So Paul McKinnon, who was the president of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, so he got in trouble because he's the guy who oversaw the ostrich fiasco in BC, right? So Carney brushed him out of the way, but they do this regularly anyway. So Paul McKinnon gets in trouble for the ostrich fiasco, and his reward is he goes from being president of Canada Food Inspection Agency and he becomes Deputy Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Second in command at Fisheries and Ocean. That's his reward. That's how government in this country works. Now, and so who replaces Paul? The guy above him is Dr. Harpreet something Kochar. He goes from being Deputy Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship, which is, again, a file that was taking a lot of beating, and he becomes the president of the Canada Food Inspection Agency. That's our government, folks. So you go from being in charge of immigration to being in charge of food. Zero qualifications, but it doesn't matter. That's what you get. A couple of other ones that were interesting. I'll go down. One, as I went down the line, the one that really caught my eye immediately was Kevin Brasso. He's the Commissioner of Canada's fight against fentanyl. Do you remember him? Nobody remembers him, but I'll remind you who he was, right? Remember in the days after when Trump was first getting elected and Carney was campaigning and Trump was pissed off that our border wasn't secure because all the fentanyl that was spilling over? Well, it happened under Trudeau. Trudeau appointed this guy, Kevin Brasso, as the fentanyl czar. Okay, because the Americans had this cool terms, right? The American had the border czar, so we thought, well, we might as well copy him. So we had the fentanyl czar, officially the Commissioner of Canada's fight against fentanyl. That guy never did anything, nothing, zero. Like Google him, search him, try and find out any initiative from that department. They barely had. I don't even think they built a website. And that's usually the first thing they do when they create a new job. They create a big website to make it look like they're doing something. So that guy does nothing, gets appointed fentanyl czar, and now. His reward, because we don't need a fentanyl czar. No, everybody's forgotten about that. So now suddenly he becomes the Senior Associate Deputy Minister. That's hilarious in and of itself, right? Senior Associate Deputy Minister. So there's a minister. Second to the minister is a deputy minister. When somebody's deputized, that means they're in charge when the main guy's not there. So minister, deputy minister. But now the deputy minister also has an associate. So there's an associate deputy minister, and then there's several associate deputy ministers, to the point where one are senior associate deputy minister and one is junior associate minister. Like, am I the only one who thinks this is like the most bizarre thing, right? And that's just what they do in Ottawa. They just pat each other on the back and reward each other for jobs poorly done. There's no merit. It's who can suck up to who the best and be the most loyal. Top of the list on that one, and it's the last one I read, but the very first one that caught my eye was Glenn Purvis, right? Glenn becomes the global head, Glenn, who was the global head of research at BlackRock Investments, becomes the Deputy Minister of International Trade. That's basically one of Carney's buddies, investment buddies. So anyways, just go look at the list. Try not to get too mad when you look at these lists. I'll take it on the chin. I'll take it for the team. I'll be the sucker who goes and looks at these lists every day and report back on it. But needless to say, it is what it is. You know, that was the topic of today. We tried to talk a little bit about fiscal responsibility. It's at this point, it might as well be an oxymoron. I don't think there is such a thing as fiscal responsibility at any level of government. I mean, if you know of a good government, you know, send me a note and I'll look into it. But you know, from a Canadian citizen, as a Canadian taxpayer, I'm very discouraged by what's going on. I mean, I definitely look forward to Carney's budget. I mean, the last one was a doozy, and I think he's gonna outdo. I mean, remember when Trudeau got elected? Trudeau said, "I'm just going to run like 3 little deficits of like 5-10 billion, and then we'll go into a balanced budget." Trudeau never had a balanced budget. And outside of COVID, Trudeau at least stayed under the $80 million deficits. Like, I mean, I'm laughing. We're literally talking in billions of dollar deficits, not millions, billions of dollars. And then out comes Carney, supposedly a world banker, a guy who's supposed to be super financially savvy, and he turns out to be just about the most crooked one that we've had. So looking forward to seeing seeing that budget. Trying to go through my list here. I wanted to talk about. I didn't want to talk about Iran. I guess I managed to go all along without talking about Iran. Maybe we'll talk about Iran next week. I mean, the one thing I'll say about Iran, I've been asked repeatedly my thoughts on it. I'm pretty biased on this. I think Iran was a really bad, dangerous regime. And I think it was long overdue that the regime themselves be taken out. I think in hindsight, when we see how this all unfolds, I'm a little disappointed. I thought the Americans would have had a better plan. You know, you remove the guy and you sort of have a backup plan. Right now, it kind of looks like they're shooting from the hip. And maybe I'm wrong, but, you know, I mean, I'm not privy to all the information. But right now, as an outsider, it looks like they're shooting a little bit from the hip. But glass half full, half empty for Alberta, this is good news. I mean, Qatar just announced it's good news and it's bad news. It's good news for Alberta because the price of oil is going up. Bad news at the pump, but good news broadly speaking, right? Danielle just budgeted a deficit on $60 oil. Oil's at $80 today. So I think Danielle's deficit is completely wiped out. Doesn't excuse you, Danielle. If you get a big surplus, do the right thing and pay down some of the debt and don't just go spending big surpluses, right? That's how we keep getting in trouble. So good news. And the other good news is it exposes again how unprepared Canada was. I mean, Qatar just invoked force majeure clause on all their contracts, and they're not shipping LNG. And if you're expected to get LNG from Qatar, it's not arriving, and you don't have a recourse. You're up the creek without a paddle. Wouldn't it have been nice if Canada could provide some LNG to replace all this Qatar stuff, right? I told you guys the story last week. We wanted to build 10 million metric tons, and in the same time we wanted to build 110. The Qataris built 70 million metric tons per year. So wouldn't it be nice if we had done that? So wake up call, right? Anyways, I digress. I didn't want to talk about the war because the war's not over, and it's not my forte. I saw it, but I'm not a huge expert when it comes to war. All right, folks, I'll give it a second. Maybe is there somebody like Diane last week who's trying to build up the courage to call Marty? Diane, if you're there, call again. Like I said, folks, don't be shy next week. Call, please. That's how this show is going to be successful. I want to talk. I mean, I'm okay talking, but it's way more fun when I get your questions and your topics. And like I said, if you want to talk to me, got a comment from somebody, a super chat. Give charter schools incentives by reopening inner city public schools. I could make that a whole topic. Okay. I'll try and remember that, Prairie Cossack. I'll try and remember that for next week. I actually got invited to a wonderful charter school just maybe I'll bring a charter school person as a guest, right? I can do that, right, John? I can have a guest on the show. Maybe I'll bring a charter school person. We can dive into charter schools and why I think charter schools in this province are important. You know, I talked about unions fighting, resisting change. Charter schools are a great example of a success story in Alberta. They operate in parallel with the main schools. They do their own thing. Okay, we got a call on the line. I'm trying to end it. Let's take the call on the line, and then we'll end it after that. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Marty. I'll be real quick. It's Canadian Spider-Man, Steve here again. And I just wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on, is it possible to make something in the Constitution that makes it illegal for governments to run deficit budgets, and would that be effective?
Yes. The answer is yes, but here's the real answer. Our government's putting anything in our Constitution at this point is almost a waste of time. You know what I mean? I mean, look at how many times our Constitution has been violated, or they'll use the notwithstanding clause, right? And or use a limitation clause and have all sorts of excuses. So in principle, the answer is yes, but in practically, the answer is no, because they ignore it. I'll give you a very good example. I mean, I talked earlier about, needing bills to spend. After you get the budget, you need to pass bills. It needs to be debated in the House of Commons. The budget is necessary to have the debate. Then you have the debate. Then you have the appropriation bills. And the only part of our Constitution that really protects citizens is section, I'm going to say 28, but it might be 52. There is a section of our Constitution that says there has to be debate on any money being spent, and we're ignoring that section. Like last year was a perfect example of all the mechanisms meant to protect the taxpayers have been ignored. So I like the question. Danielle's tried it. Lots of places have tried it, but in Canada, we're making a mockery of our Constitution. Laws seem to be meaningless at this point. Appreciate the call. Okay, we're kind of running out of time. Just a quick plug. So definitely call in again next Thursday, folks. Same time, 1 o'clock. If you're not already a member of the Western Standard, please join. It's $10 a month. It's or $100 a year. It's www.westernstandard, all one word, .news. And do me a favor too. I mean, I like talking here. I also like texting, so you can find me, Marty Up North, on X. Otherwise, we'll see you next week, folks. Thanks.